You saw this Xiaomi folding phone, their new Mix Fold 2. What a beautiful looking thing.
Yeah, this came out of nowhere.
Came out of nowhere. Good timing. I'm sure they wanted to get your attention away from this one right here on the desk. The Z Fold 4. Now, here's the thing. Samsung has had quite a head start, but there have been improvements made from a hardware perspective. I already talked about the Find N from Oppo, which has a really amazing solution for the crease in the middle of the display. It really gets it taut when you open that hinge, so that you can barely see the crease. But the problem is software, for me at least. There's certain things I couldn't do, like I couldn't pin a launcher. I've complained about this before. On the Chinese version of ColorOS that won't let you replace the stock launcher permanently. You can load it and then click around and you're right back into the original launcher.
Right.
And you might be saying, well, what's the issue with that? There's certain things I can't get rid of which are regional and useless to me. Otherwise, I would have had my SIM card in that phone because the hardware was so cool. We have another example of that today from Xiaomi. This might even be cooler. It's a lot closer in design to the Z Fold 4. The aspect ratio is pretty much the same. Huge camera on the back. The thing is thinner, flatter. You can see the way the hinge works. It's only 11.2 millimeters thick. That's compared to 15.8 on the new Z Fold. That's quite a big difference. To put that in perspective, the S22 Ultra is just under 9 millimeters. Right? So that's still a pretty big phone, but it's not folding or anything like that. So I think most people would say, okay, it's thin enough at 9 millimeters. This folding device from Xiaomi, the Mix Fold 2, is only 2 millimeters, just over 2 millimeters fatter. You got to go a whole nother 4 millimeters, over 4 millimeters, to get to the Z Fold 4. So it's going to feel a lot more like a typical smartphone in its folded package when you see this Mix Fold 2, which is impressive. And here's the other good part. Since they were able to pack more battery density, you're actually getting a bigger battery unit than you get in the much fatter Z Fold 4. Now for the bad news. China exclusive, guaranteed software problems. I mean, they can send me one. Xiaomi, you can send me one. I would love to play with it. And I'm still talking to Pete, telling you, give me some sort of ROM on the Find N and I'll use that too. If I can just get a launcher going that doesn't force me to have universal search, which is regional and still has Chinese characters that I can't get rid of.
Yeah, it's a really nice looking phone.
Thickness is going to be the big thing. I'm not all about making everything thinner all the time, but they're big. This is the previous model. They're big, and if somebody offered to make that thinner for you, well, you have a point. Thinner is not always better, but in this case, you could imagine it in a thinner formula, and that's what they're aiming at doing. Other specs on this device: 120 hertz, 6.56 inch, 2520 by 1080 OLED display, inner flexible display, 120 hertz, 8.02 inches, 2160 by 1914, OLED. And they're from Samsung. So if you're wondering about the display performance, you're getting them from Samsung. Snapdragon 8 Plus Gen 1, amazing chip, 12 gigs of RAM. It's flagship top to bottom. The conversion on the Chinese price for this device, $13.35. Also, not bad. Now, granted, if they ever sold it in some other market, they might not sell it for that price. But pretty cool. A little bit of a rip in the design. But how many ways are you going to do this thing? It's maybe slightly less interesting than the Find N, because in the Find N, they said, what if we do a different aspect ratio?
Yes.
And I found that to be interesting. But I just couldn't put my SIM card in it because, well, like I said, there were a couple of annoyances for me, which just had to do with region.
It's software. Really.
It's software. It's really
The
software.
OS.
It's a software thing. It's not even the OS. I could deal with Color OS if I could get an international version of it.
Does it support the apps? North American?
Yeah. You can. Yeah, it's more like, for example, universal search. If you want to swipe down and just search for an app, which I use all the time,
Yeah.
it pulls me into not something like Google. It's a regional search engine, and I've got the default character input is not in English characters. Like this, I can't do that on a daily basis. Find a workaround for that. And granted, this is my own use case, and I'm sure people have found workarounds. But for me, there's some devices I wish were introduced internationally, natively from the company without the need for such workarounds.
Sure.